So I'm joined here by Dr. Andrew Mikhail, who is a scholar at the Center for Study of Ethnic Conflict at the Queen's University in Belfast and also a fellow at the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. Thanks, Dr. Andrew, for joining us and your first assessment or comments on what the reports are emerging from Beirut that perhaps the Israeli Defense Forces in their aerial strike have managed to kill Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah in Lebanon, though the Hezbollah-aligned media and their sources deny that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I mean, that's the Israel's stated aim, and it has been a policy outcome that they have sought for quite a long time, because it looks at Hezbollah as the offshore policy maker for Iran and for Syria. It's important to note that it's probably unlikely, very unlikely, that Israel can completely destroy Hezbollah. Certainly the ongoing attacks and assault on Gaza have shown that it is unable to eliminate Hamas. So it's unable and unlikely to be able to get rid of Hezbollah, which is a much more sophisticated and wider and better armed militia group across Lebanon. But the important point to make here is that there won't be an Israeli policy in Lebanon that does not come with significant loss of innocent life. However, and we're defining that by non-Hezbollah targets. And what has been key in the last couple of days and in Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech is that Israel is likely to go to whatever lengths it sees fit to try and achieve its policy outcomes.
Dr. Andrew, this attack happened at a time when Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu was in the United Nations in New York. He was addressing the UNGA, and perhaps he gave the operational approval while addressing there, while US continues to claim that it was not kept in the loop. So how do you see this development?
Tory, as he usually puts on a performance there, and this was no different. Considering the rhetoric and discourse that Israel has had since October the 8th, whenever Hezbollah began striking Israel, the rhetoric coming from the Netanyahu government has been leading up to this point, promising significant and extensive strikes against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, but also promising to actually wipe the threat of Hezbollah towards Israel off the agenda. And I think that we see the current strikes not only today, but of the last several days, at an intensity that is new for this current round of conflict, and is an intensity that we haven't seen since the Hezbollah and Israel war of 2006.
Do you see now that Israel will go ahead with a ground invasion into Lebanon, considering the fact that in the last 1 week, since Monday, the pager blast, the walkie-talkie blast, and aerial strikes have managed to weaken Hezbollah, as many of their commanders and top commanders and also some foot soldiers on the ground have been killed. So after inflicting this severe damage, is Israel sensing that perhaps a ground invasion will only be able to weaken Hezbollah further?
There has been rumors of troop deployment and troop mobilization since October the 8th. We've seen Israel fire with tanks fire into southern Lebanon and injuring and murdering journalists, for example. The important point is that this saber rattling that Israel appears to be doing regarding troop invasion might not be a bluff. For the longest time, I think that this was considered to be a step beyond the pale, a step that was quite unforeseeable. But now, considering we've seen the extent of Israel's assault in Gaza, a ground invasion might possibly be on the cards. Now, certainly it won't be extensive. Israel invaded Lebanon under invitation in 1982 and remained in southern Lebanon until 2000. Its experience in southern Lebanon while holding territory was very, very negative, and eventually internal pressure in Israel, as well as the pressure that it faced in southern Lebanon militarily from Hezbollah, forced it to retreat. I don't think that they're very keen on establishing that same precedent right now.
Dr. Andrew, a lot of people said that perhaps Israel was trying to de-escalate by escalating the situation and not going for a full-blown war. And considering the fact, if we believe the reports from Israeli media that Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah has been killed, do you think that this particular incident will escalate the war, or will it bring down the entire tone of the war and perhaps achieve the kind of peace which Western experts are claiming that perhaps this attack will achieve?
So if the question is that this would bring an end to the conflict if Hassan Nasrallah has been killed, and there are, as you said, very many conflicting reports about that, and the likelihood is that he's a very hard man to get to, and it's unlikely that he has been killed. But we won't know for sure until he plans his next presentation, and rumors will abound in the meantime. If he is killed, if he has been killed, and if he is killed in the future, if he hasn't been killed already, this will not stop the conflict. There is a very strong organizational capacity within Hezbollah. It has a council of leadership that is deeply experienced from years that the organization has been functioning, has relations across the region with different governments, most notably Iran and Syria, and it would continue on as an organization. And if anything, the death of Hassan Nasrallah at the hands of the Israelis would only inspire the organization to try and seek vengeance in another way.
What are the thoughts about Iran, the axis of resistance, which it calls through its proxy militias, which it has in the Middle East? Do you think Iran will try to drag itself into the war?
Well, you're right to point out that it has been avoiding this war considerably. Even Israeli strike on Tehran in July did not inspire a significant and extensive response from Iran. It doesn't serve, and it's important to note that in some sense, Hezbollah understands the vulnerable position that it is in. It doesn't wish to extend this conflict. It doesn't wish to invite Israeli invasion. But importantly, it has been shown to be quite weak in the last week. It has shown that Israel's outward and increased aggression has made it vulnerable. So it's important that for the organization, and certainly not from my position is that avoiding Lebanese loss of life is of paramount importance, which means de-escalating the conflict through a diplomatic means. But in the eyes of Hezbollah, they'll want to ensure that their exit from this current round of conflict means that they do not look weak. Now, what does that look like can be many different things. But if there is a significant continuation of conflict and significant deaths of key leaders and key assets of Hezbollah, it becomes increasingly unlikely that there can be an immediate diplomatic solution. Without Hezbollah, and by proxy, Iran and Syria being able to leave this current conflict with some small measure of victory or some small measure of resistance.
How do you see the role of United States? On one hand, it kept saying that perhaps they're trying to de-escalate the situation. On the other hand, arms, aid, and other support was given to Netanyahu. And even this attack, particular attack, the approval for which Mr. Netanyahu gave while being in United States. And US still denies that it was kept in the loop about this attack. So how do you see from here the role of United States at a time when it is trying to stitch new alliances in Middle East? It's trying to enhance its relationship with other Middle Eastern players. But what would be the role of United States when it comes to de-escalation now if Iran, or the axis of resistance as it is called, tries to escalate the situation there?
It's unfortunate that the global leadership and many of the allies around Israel have only issued statements asking for de-escalation, but yet continue to, in the main, despite Germany potentially reducing its weapon sales to Israel, have not materially undermined their support for Israel, which is, quite frankly, the only way that a de-escalation can happen at this point. Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure domestically. He's not very well liked leader at the best of times, and there has been increasing protests at his handling of the Gaza conflict. He needs a victory as much as anyone, and being able to ensure a victory over Hezbollah, and by design, claim that he is the rightful protector and the head of state of Israel, he gets one victory. The US, since October 7, and other world leadership have basically looked the other way at increasing Israeli, likely Israeli war crimes. Certainly the International Criminal Court has, having issued an arrest warrant for Hamas leadership and for Prime Minister Netanyahu, sees the ongoing actions in Gaza as war crimes. However, their key international allies have not followed suit by asking for censure of Israel's actions, or even going the extra mile to forcefully and diplomatically engage in de-escalation.
Dr. Your last word on the emerging situation in the next 24 hours. How do you see this panning out? If considering that how it has been going on for the last 24 hours, how do you see this escalating from here? Or how do you see the situation emerging from here, since many civilians have been killed in Lebanon, and Lebanon or the Hezbollah group is also claiming that it will retaliate for this, and retaliation has already started in some of the West Bank settlements.
Hence, for Lebanese people at this point, my family, my friends, and the commentators that you can see, that there is an incredible amount of trepidation about what way this will turn. Very much Israel is on the front foot. It continues to push the envelope in terms of its actions in Lebanon. And if any kind of forceful response from Hezbollah were to result in significant loss of Israeli life, we might at that point see that small invasion force that we've been talking about. Unfortunately, this current situation is very, very precariously balanced. And provided that we, as you rightly pointed out, have a summit of world leadership at this point, one might hope that there will be significant discussions on how to end and resolve this current conflict in its current phase. This long term, the situation will bubble on. Hezbollah will remain on the agenda for the Netanyahu government, and we may go back to a small shadow conflict that we have seen for the past 15 or so years. We can only hope that there is some type of diplomatic response that reduces the level of conflict and violence as it's going on.
Thanks, Dr. Andrew, for joining us and sharing your insights on the developing situation in Middle East.